be responsible in this moment and begin by acknowledging that the land we stand on is that of the Lenape people. It is land that for generations has been stewarded by them. It is land that is occupied, unceded, and seized. It is the territory of their ancestors. The Lenape people, we must give honor and we must give thanks for the work that they have done on this land, historically and presently. Let us be thankful, let us be grateful, and let us honor them in the care of this land, which they have left us with. Thank you. I now want to do a very wonderful thing, and I want to turn the ceremonies over to our great Executive Director of Peace Action New York State, none other than Emily Rubino.
Hi, everyone. So as Jim said, my name is Emily Rubino. I'm the Executive Director here at the Peace Action Fund of New York State. And welcome everyone who's joining in this room, who's joining on the live stream online. It's really good to be here with everyone tonight for the 2002 William Sloane Coffin Jr. Peacemaker Awards. And I really think we have an exceptional program for you tonight with some really amazing speakers. So I'm excited for us to be getting started. Tonight's theme is Journalism on the Front Line, the Fourth Estate in Peril. I'm very excited to later hear from both John Nichols and our 2002 William Sloane Coffin Jr. Peacemaker Awardee, Katrina vanden Heuvel, later in this program, and I'm sure they can speak at much more length and in much more depth on this topic, so I'll keep my introduction brief. Journalists and peace activists work hand in hand to help raise awareness of the world's most pressing issues in print and in the streets. Journalists are risking their lives every day to do the invaluable work of making sure that we know the truth, that people across the globe fighting for their basic rights are able to share their voices, their stories, and their realities. In a time of ever-increasing hostility towards journalists, independent media, and facts in general, we need to make sure that we are continuing to support, uplift, and honor the work of journalists and publications that are not afraid to continue to tell the truth and encourage us to think critically in the face of an ever-increasing amount of misinformation and propaganda. I'd like us to start by taking a moment to honor journalists who have lost their lives this year in the midst of war reporting from all over the globe, from Ukraine to Afghanistan to Palestine. So if everyone could just bow their heads for a moment. Thank you. Though this topic can be serious and heavy, and the stakes are extremely high, as many of you also know, in order to sustain a movement, we also need to take time not just to mourn, but to celebrate, uplift, and affirm the incredible work of our friends, partners, and communities. I'm so glad that tonight we can celebrate and uplift the invaluable contributions that people in the field of journalism have contributed to the world in general, and especially to the peace movement. Journalism is the first step of documenting our history, not only of conflict, but of movements for peace and justice. Through this work, we can continue to build stronger movements generation after generation. This event, though it's a lot of work, is one of my favorite times of year because it gives us the opportunity to uplift, celebrate, and show gratitude to some of the wonderful people who impact our work, support our work, and pave the way for the future. I'm really honored to help lead an organization that puts such a strong emphasis on learning with and from the next generation of peace activists through our student organizing program. So with that in mind, I'd love to invite our Student and Campaigns Coordinator, Ronnie Zahavi-Brunner, up to the stage to talk a little bit more about our student organizing program.
Hi, everyone. Oh. Hey, does this work?
If If not, we can just use this one. Now it's on.
Yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Ronnie. I am the Student and Campaigns Coordinator at Peace Action New York State. I am really honored to be here tonight to celebrate the work of our student organizers in the past year and everything that they've done for the peace movement. Our campus organizer program started in 2011 with the goal of empowering young people within the peace movement and training the next generation of activists for decolonization and disarmament. In the past decade, we've evolved from 1 chapter to 14 chapters with hundreds of members all around New York State, from New York City all the way up to Plattsburgh. This year, 6 of our students took the initiative to start completely new peace action chapters on their campuses and are now working hard to build a peace activist community on their campuses from the ground up. The involvement of young people is crucial for the success of the peace movement, as students have historically led some of the most impactful peace and freedom campaigns in the US and around the world. It was college students who got their universities to divest from the South African apartheid government. It was young students who started the civil disobedience campaign that toppled Milosevic in Serbia. And it was students who turned their campuses into powerful movement base camps during the 2019 pro-independence protests in Hong Kong. Even now, as I am speaking, it is students and young women in Iran who are standing at the front lines of protests against the Iranian regime, facing harsh repression. In order to dismantle US imperialism, achieve climate justice, and fight oppression everywhere, we need the radical leadership and mobilizing power of young activists. I've only been in my position for a few short weeks, but I am amazed at the passion and knowledge our students have shown in their work. From hosting panel discussions on capitalism to organizing a March for International Peace Day, our students are doing important work on the ground, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. So now, let's watch a short video to introduce all of us to our 2022 student organizers.
Hi, I'm Miranda Reynolds, and I'm the current student organizer at Peace Action Sarah Lawrence.
I'm Bree from St. John's University.
Ruby Suni Geneseo.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Daly.
And I'm Celia Darling.
And
we're the campus organizers at Clarkson. Yay!
I'm Logie from Wells College.
Christopher, Vassar College.
I'm Mary Claire from Pace University.
Alexander, SUNY Plattsburgh.
I'm Shatise from Columbia University.
I'm Charlie from Siena College.
My name is Margaret Figliolino, and I'm the current Peace Action student organizer at Lemoyne College.
Yay, we're very excited about them. So now to transition more to talk about our Don Schaefer Student Peacemaker Award. Each year, the Don Schaefer Student Peacemaker Award congratulates an outstanding student chapter on their work and leadership in peace, education, and activism within their community and amongst their peers in the past year. The award is named after the late Don Schaefer, who some of you in this room knew, who was just a really great leader and a friend of the Peace Action Fund of New York State. And he's the reason we have our student organizing program. He had convinced a friend to kickstart the program with a grant that allowed us to hire the first part-time student organizer, which launched the program back in 2011. Now, 11 years later, we're so glad to see his legacy continue on through the work of our wonderful student organizers and to celebrate the exemplary work this year of Lemoyne Peace Action.
So it's been an incredible experience to work with all of our student chapters, and all of them deserve to be congratulated for the work that they've done in the past year. But one chapter in particular has really blown us away, and that's Lemoyne Peace Action. Throughout the year, the chapter has been dedicated to their work with the local community. Students were active in local mutual aid actions, canvassed with Back from the Brink, and worked closely with the Syracuse Peace Council to promote denuclearization efforts within the Syracuse community. The chapter collaborated with Agree New York, an organization promoting safe, green, and affordable energy, to host a webinar on the harms of the nuclear energy industry. Their work has consistently emphasized the local upstate region and spurred important discussions between students and experts in their field. Their focus on climate and nuclear weapons, their presence not just on campus, but in the Syracuse community and the Syracuse Peace Council, and the great foundation that they've been able to build on campus are just some of the reasons why Lemoyne is more than deserving of this year's Don Schaefer Award.
Though the Shafer family is not able to join us tonight in person, Robert Shafer has sent us a statement to read on his behalf, so I'll pass it back to Ronnie to read that.
From Robert Shafer, on behalf of my brothers and myself, and in memory of our father, I am happy to add our congratulations to the Peace Action Chapter at Lemoyne College for earning this year's Don Schaefer Peacemaker Award. My father was active in campaigns against militarism during his own years at Brooklyn College in the early days of the Cold War in the late 1940s. And in the years before his death in 2013, he helped push Peace Action New York State to devote resources to student organizing. Don would be so pleased to know that year after year, students across the state, in conjunction with Peace Action staff members, have been organizing around issues of peace and justice, and then in such work they link global issues, national issues, and local issues. With regard to the work of the upstate Lemoyne College chapter, my father would be especially pleased to know that they work closely with the Syracuse Peace Council, a mainstay of the peace movement in New York State. And that the campus chapter has done educational and service work around climate change and around refugees and new immigrants in the state. So we will add our congratulations to the Lemoyne College Peace Action Student Chapter and to the chapter's organizer, Morgan, for this award and for continuing the student organizing, which is by now an integral part of the work of Peace Action New York State.
So we'd like to now officially present this year's 2002 Don Schaefer Student Peacemaker Award to Lemoyne College. This is their award. Yay! As it's a Monday night and Lemoyne is up in Syracuse, they're not here in person to physically accept it. But we'd now like to share first a video from Margaret Engel, who was our former student and campaigns coordinator, who worked closely with the Lemoyne chapter last year before embarking on her Fulbright project in Bosnia last month. I think she's joining us on the live stream in Bosnia, so hi, Margaret. But we'll first show her video, and then we'll get to hear from the students from Lemoyne.
Hey everyone, it's Margaret Engel, and I was the former student and campaigns coordinator during the 2021 to 2022 school year. I just want to say congratulations to for their outstanding work this past year. I was so inspired every day. Every time I got to speak on the phone with Morgan and hear about what the chapter was up to, it was just amazing to hear everything they accomplished through their climate initiatives, through Back to the Brink campaign, and working with the Syracuse Peace Council. They just were consistently on top of it, and it was great to see. So I wish I could be there in person to see Margaret and see everyone at the Peace Action Network, but for now, I can just send my regards, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the night. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Marie Winger, the Secretary and former Vice President of Peace Action Lemoyne, and I'm Margaret Guglielmo, and I'm the current president. We would first like to thank Peace Action New York State for awarding us the Don Schaefer Peacemaker Award, and we would also like to thank our former president, Morgan Piersmont, for all the hard work that she's done for our club.
Without her determination, PAL would not be able to be the force of good it is in the Syracuse community. We would also like to thank the Syracuse Peace Council for guiding and collaborating with us over this past year. Thank you again to PAFNYS, and hope everyone has a good night.
Great, and I think the Lemoyne students are actually with the Syracuse Peace Council watching this in a room at Lemoyne, so hello, congrats. And we'll ship them the award, don't worry.
They will get it.
They're getting it. Great, so next I have the pleasure of turning the stage over to our Wonder Woman of a board chair, Sally Jones to present the Local Media Award recognition.
Thank you, Emily. It is my pleasure to honor local media tonight. When we had this idea to honor journalism, we asked all of our chapters and allied affiliates to nominate people in their community, either photojournalists or reporters, print or otherwise, who they felt really made a difference in getting the message out on peace and justice issues. So this is going to be I wish we had, we really need a whole day to honor all of them. We don't have that. So what I've done is we've created a video with a picture and a little blurb about each one. And upstairs we have certificates for those who are here tonight to give to you, and the rest I think you're watching. Thank you so much. And we will get those certificates to you. All right, so roll the video. We recognize Milton Alamati from New York City to Global for your work with Black Star News and for encouraging citizen journalism and for documenting the dehumanizing and racist writing by European and American authors and explorers. We honor Jim Anderson from the Western New York. We recognize you for your radio program, Conversations with Jim Anderson, live streamed on power965radio.com and on WUFO from Buffalo, and engaging on topics from the local to the global. We recognize Sandra Blackwell and the Westchester County Press for the decades you have served the African American community in Westchester. Thank you for consistently publishing stories covering the movement to abolish nuclear weapons. And I actually goofed a little bit. We honor Ben Beagle. We recognize you for your work at the Livingston County News, making sure that stories about Genesee Valley Citizens for Peace and their many activities are covered fairly and accurately. And now we honor Sandra Blackwell. I missed Anissa Banks, but I'm going to read hers. We recognize Anissa Banks on the Challenger, who serves a vital function in the Western New York area with news, events, and opinions from the African American community. We recognize Chris Bolt from Syracuse for your work as news director and now general manager of Syracuse University, the Syracuse University-based radio station WAER, where you have been responsive to requests for coverage with special attention to environmental issues. Shanna Braff of Long Island, we recognize you for your excellent coverage in the Long Island Advance of the World Peace Vigil on August 6, 2022 at an annual commemoration organized by Long Island Peace Groups. Ed Brody from Brooklyn, we recognize you for your decades of documenting peace and justice events both in Brooklyn and elsewhere, faithfully and voluntarily, creating excellent coverage which is now posted to your YouTube channel. Andrew Courtney from Westchester, we recognize you for your work documenting peace and justice activity in Westchester for decades. Additionally, we honor you for your important work in war zones and documenting war refugees now in the U.S. Ellen Davidson of Vets for Peace, we recognize you for your vivid photographs of Veterans for Peace actions in the New York area and elsewhere, and your contributions to the National Veterans for Peace newsletter. Jim Emke, who came from Binghamton tonight, Of Broome County, we recognize your work as news editor of Channel 34 Binghamton and your coverage of peace action and Veterans for Peace events. It is said that you are the most dependable newsman in the southern tier of New York. Joe Friendly, who's back there from New York City, we recognize you for your videography of countless local protests in New York City and for posting them, often the same day, on our YouTube channel, and for giving generously of your time and technical skills. John Funiciello of the Capital District, we recognize your work as editor of the Solidarity News, which has been covering labor, environmental, racial justice, and peace issues since 1983. Mike Greenlaw from Syracuse, we recognize your work as a photographer showing the life and struggles of a variety of groups, and for covering Syracuse Peace Council events for the Syracuse Post-Standard and as a freelancer. The Hofstra Chronicle of Hofstra University, we recognize you for your coverage of foreign policy and peace issues, the International Science Lecture Series, the Long Island Alliance Peace Fellows Program, and Hofstra's Center for Civic Engagement. Ted Kirkland from Buffalo, we recognize you for your work as a columnist, commentator, and author, shining a light on local news and politics in print, radio, and TV, pursuing and sharing truth through media and teaching. Eric McGregor, who's out there, of New York City. Eric, we recognize you for documenting social justice and peace events and protests, especially in New York City, with pictures that are technically excellent, and for how you always manage to get close to capture the action. Michael Neiman, PhD of Western New York, we recognize you for your research on propaganda, the impact of consumer culture, temporary autonomous zones, nonviolent conflict resolution, and your teaching at Buffalo State, and your own journalism. Thomas O'Neill White of Buffalo, we recognize you for your sensitive and courageous reporting on WBFO radio on issues related to racial equity and criminal justice that has helped amplify voices on a significant local platform. Hideko Otake, who's out there, of New York City, and Okinawa, we recognize you for covering New York City peace demonstrations and vigils, including the weekly Yemen Vigil at Union Square, and bringing awareness to Americans of the harmful U.S. military presence in Okinawa. Susan Rutman of Southwest Westchester, we recognize you for your creative documentation of the activities of the concerned families of Westchester and other activist groups in a way that reinforces their messages. Talking Peace with Western New York Peace Center, we recognize your live-streamed radio and social media programs that highlight peace and social justice issues, and your host, Deidre Emmel and Vicki Ross. John Tarleton of The Independent in New York City, we recognize your coverage of stories from a progressive point of view, often with a New York City focus, but covering national and international news as well. Thank you for covering the Move the Money New York City campaign. WBAI, from New York to New Jersey to global, we recognize WBAI Pacifica Radio for the vast array of original programming and reporting, which is broadcast to listeners in New York and around the world. Thank you to so many WBAI staff, producers, and programs. Become a WBAI buddy. Thank you.
Wow. One more round of applause for all of our incredible local media. Great. Next, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce John Nichols. He's right up here. John Nichols is the author or co-author of more than a dozen books on democracy, politics, and media. The National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine and a frequent commentator on many national and international news outlets, including MSNBC, NPR, BBC, and Al Jazeera, he has for many years argued that US media fails in its coverage of war and peace issues. Nichols is the co-founder of Free Press, the nation's media reform network, and has delivered keynote addresses before Congresses of the International Federation of Journalists in Athens and Cadiz. And here he is going to deliver another address for us. So come on up here, John.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much. What an honor to be with folks. And thank you, Emily, for all the incredible organizing tonight. And thank you, yes. To Ronnie, where'd Ronnie? For Ronnie for that. I know that you inspired everyone in this room by highlighting the student activism, and that was just absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for doing that. You've come into this role very easily and very well. And finally, let me just shout out to Sally, because I've been in journalism since I was 11 years old, and I have never been so optimistic about the craft as I was just a moment ago. There are more people doing more good work than I ever imagined, so I'm very, very pleased. I also want to take just a moment up front, and I promise I'm not going to go row by row and talk about everyone in the room. But I do want to recognize the incredible memory of Don Shafer. And Don was a friend and a comrade and probably the most indefatigable peace activist I ever knew. And yes, and the thing I will tell, just one quick story about Don, which is that Don would call me on the phone. I live in the middle of the country, far from New York City or anything elaborate like that. And Don would call me on the phone and he said, we're thinking about doing something in Hastings-on-Hudson, or we're thinking about doing something in Westchester or someplace, and is there a chance you might be interested in coming to talk to that? And I would say, yeah, let me know as the details come together. And then the next call from Don would be, yeah, it's on September 18th, and we expect you to get there at about 2 o'clock. And he would always sort of miss the middle part where you actually agreed to do it. And I just have to tell you, that is an organizer. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Don Shafer and for his support for the Student Awards. For Peace Action, Lemoyne could not be better honored. Thank you also to Cora Weiss for being a former University of Wisconsin student and helping me to remember all the great things in Madison and all the great work that she and her husband do for peace and justice in New York City. And finally, a shout out for Alfred Meyer, who some of you know and some of you may not, but I come from Madison, Wisconsin, and Alfred Meyer now lives on the Upper East Side of New York. Yes, go Badgers indeed, although not so good on Saturday. But I come from Madison, Wisconsin, and before Alfred came here to New York, he was the kind of key player in Physicians for Social Responsibility and all sorts of other activism in Madison, and was a true militant peace activist for a very, very long time, including in that period around September 11th and thereafter. And so a good shout out for Alfred Meyer. So, William Sloane Coffin said, "The world is too dangerous for anything but truth, and too small for anything but love." And I think that may be the perfect sum up for Peace Action. Because Peace Action as a group recognizes that you have to tell the truth. You have to tell the truth about a world in which militarism is dominant, in which disarmament, which should be our first priority, is often forgotten, where military budgets in this country are going through the roof, higher and higher and higher, and where in fact our Pentagon now puts in the conservative proposal for the military budget only to have it increased by Congress. There is a lot of truth to tell. And Peace Action over the years has expanded its vision to recognize the intersection between economic and social and racial justice and peace, to recognize the intersection between peace and saving the planet. It's a brilliant group that has done incredible work, but it has often had to do it in telling painful and difficult truths. And the thing that makes Peace Action so special is that it remembers that second part of William Sloane Coffin's statement, right? That you do have to do it with love. And it is love that motivates that faith that it is possible to overcome militarism, that it is possible to overcome colonialism, that it is possible to overcome injustice, that it is in fact possible to say that another world is possible, that it can happen. And Peace Action kind of keeps the faith there. I have always said that if Peace Action didn't exist, as a journalist, I would have to create it. Because there are too few groups that focus on these fundamental issues. But this group does. And I think it does so in the tradition of Tom Paine and Claude Levi-Strauss and Rebecca Solnit, my three touchstones as regards faith in the future, and an understanding that there's a difference between hope and optimism. An optimist will tell you everything's going to work out fine. That's great, and I know a lot of optimists, and I got no problem with them. But there's a big difference between optimism and hope. Someone who hopes knows that things can be pretty rough. They understand it may not be perfect, but they hope for the right turnout, and they're willing to work for it. That's different than being an optimist. That's different than just saying, oh yeah, I'm sure it'll sort out. That's taking on a level of responsibility. And I think that is what Peace Action has done for a very, very long time. And I think that with that in mind, I'm going to say just a couple of things tonight that I hope you'll take with you and use as you choose. First and foremost, peace is on the ballot this November. I am so glad you applauded for that, because the next line is going to not be an applause line, which is very few Americans know that because our media system fails us. So peace is on the ballot. There's absolutely no question. It is a fundamental issue in this year's election, and yet most people will go to the polls without an understanding of how fundamental it is, how vital it is. So let's burrow in for a second on that notion that peace is on the ballot. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not very complicated. It's not very hard to figure out. Last week, Vladimir Putin and his allies and associates suggested the possibility that tactical nuclear weapons might be used in Ukraine and potentially in other spots where Russia felt threatened. And then the response of the President of the United States, Joe Biden, was that the United States would use all of its military power in order to protect every inch, and he repeated that phrase, every inch of every NATO country. So you understand what we had just last week? We had the full re-upping of the Cold War. We literally had a Russian leader saying, possibly could go to nukes, and an American leader saying, yes, we're going to come back with everything we got. That's a Cold War. Now, we may not want to acknowledge it. Our media does not talk about it, but the fact of the matter is that the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists started this year by moving the doomsday clock to 100 seconds, 100 seconds from midnight. We could pause for 100 seconds. It wouldn't be that long. And that's the fact of the matter, that when they say we are 100 seconds to midnight, they say that is how close we are to nuclear holocaust. Now, remember when Barack Obama was president? I think many of you would like to do that very much. But remember when Barack Obama was president, we were up to 5 or 6 minutes from midnight. That wasn't very good, to be honest. That's still not enough. But the fact of the matter is that we were actually talking about moving in the right direction. We are now talking about moving in the wrong direction. That doomsday clock is ticking closer and closer to midnight. And we're not even talking about the challenge with China. At this point, our relations with China as regards Taiwan are more tense than at any time since Nixon went to China. It's 50 years. We are at a level of tension, and a growing level of tension. That ought to unsettle all of us. And again, it ought to make all of us understand that when they say 100 seconds to midnight, they mean it, because this is another nuclear power. And then we'd say, okay, well, yeah, but what's happening in America? How are we responding? Well, we are responding with an ever-increasing military budget. No understanding that diplomacy and cooperation and global connections are the way to avoid war, but in fact saying we need to put more and more money into the military budget, literally that we are ticking toward an $800 billion a year annual military budget, and we are told at home that we can't do things here. We cannot feed a child. We cannot maintain the child tax credit because we have got to fund the military-industrial complex. So by any measure, you put all those pieces together, peace is on the ballot. It's whether we acknowledge it or not, but the fact is, it's on the ballot. So let's look at what our media is doing, and I sure don't mean the 24 people that Sally just honored. Thank heavens for them, for every single one of them. And thank heavens for the grassroots, working class journalists across this country, many of whom in big institutions that they don't agree with, who try to do the job. But understand that our media system is failing us. When was the last time you saw a debate between candidates for the United States Senate on the question of whether we should lower our military budget? When was the last time you saw it? When was the last time you saw a candidate for Congress or for the US Senate advertising on television about their support for disarmament? When was the last time you saw it? When was the last time you saw a candidate in a critical race being quizzed on the opening segment of a program, not on Fox, not on CNN, on MSNBC, on a network that we might actually find, some things that we take some comfort from? When was the last time you saw the opening segment deal with the question of, is there an alternative to nuclear war as regards Ukraine? Is there a diplomatic route out of it? When was the last time you saw Ro Khanna, who today argued for a diplomatic route out? When was the last time you saw him leading the news talking about that? We don't see it. And we have to ask ourselves why. The fundamental reason is that our media system has collapsed as regards coverage of the world. I grew up not in a perfect time. I still am waiting for the New York Times apology for not just the Vietnam War, but also Iraq, right? I mean, we didn't have a perfect media in the past, but we had a media that did cover the world. We have now seen a collapsing of international coverage. Newspapers like the Chicago Tribune, the Baltimore Sun, which used to maintain multiple foreign bureaus, and often, which got it right when the New York Times or the Washington Post got it wrong, those bureaus are gone. Bureaus of our TV networks have disappeared. We now, if you see something happening in Ukraine, you're very likely to see the reporter speaking from London. They've got one reporter over there in London or Paris, but they're not on the ground. When they go on the ground is when it's too late, right? They're actually quite good about bringing in the reporters to cover the war once it started, but they're not covering it before it starts. They're not covering that pursuit of peace. And I don't blame the working journalists for this. In fact, I agree, peace demands a free press. The problem is we don't have a free press. We don't have a sufficient free press to the crisis of our times. And that is why, while peace is on the ballot, most people don't know about it. And let me close simply by saying that this is where Peace Action comes in. And I don't want to put all the pressure in the world on you guys. But the fact of the matter is, you're the only ones that are going to get us out of this mess, right? If you expect the media, our media system, to get this right, isn't it going to happen? You're going to be on the sidelines waiting. If you wade into this struggle, you can have a profound impact. And many of you already do it. You write the letters to the editor, you write the op-eds, you confront media outlets and say you have to do a better job. What I would ask you to do is so much more. The fact of the matter is, peace should be your first issue, but a journalism that understands and sustains peace should be your second issue, right? Don't neglect your core focus, but understand you need a better media in this country. And keep doing what you're doing tonight, celebrating independent, not-for-profit media that goes out and does what the big media institutions fail to do, that covers a peace movement in this country that is alive, that is vibrant, and that is demanding that we understand another world is possible. Keep doing what you're doing, and then, if you will, allow me just one final deviation, and that is to speak about why it's so important that we celebrate independent media and why it's so important tonight that you're celebrating Katrina vanden Heuvel. Now, I understand the skepticism about someone talking about their boss. But I have known Katrina for a very long time, since before she was my boss. And I know her as a friend and a comrade. And I will tell you this. I remember on September 11th, September 11th, 2001, I was in Washington, D.C. And I was there as the smoke came over the Pentagon. I was there as people rushed away from the Capitol. And I came up to New York a couple days later. And I was on the phone with Katrina quite a bit during that period. And on that Friday after September 11th, I said to Katrina, I think that Barbara Lee is going to vote against the authorization of the use of military force. And I said, I think we ought to have an article in The Nation immediately about that. We ought to get it into the print issue, and we ought to have it online as well. And Katrina, having been literally through everything that happened to New York, being just a few blocks away from where September 11th played out, and frankly, having at a time when so many other journalists wavered and blinked, and frankly did not understand the fundamental issues that were in play, Katrina said, absolutely, we must do that story. And the next week, when I said I wanted to write about the rise of a peace movement that said we should not let our horror at what happened on September 11th become an excuse for new wars and new militarism and new military spending, that we ought to seek diplomatic routes out of this, and we ought to seek policing routes out of this, not another war. Katrina said, yes, do that story as well, and we put it in The Nation. Katrina vanden Heuvel has always been ahead of the curve for peace and justice, and I am so glad you are honoring her tonight. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, John, for that invigorating speech. So now we're getting to it. I'd like to now introduce Cora Weiss to come up, who's going to actually introduce Katrina and present her with the award. We're honored to have Cora joining us today. Cora Weiss has devoted most of her life to the peace movement, the movement for the advancement of women, for civil rights, and for human rights. A member of the board of SANE from 1986 to 2000, Cora co-chaired the commission to merge SANE and the nuclear freeze into what is now Peace Action National. She directed Riverside Church's disarmament program with Reverend William Sloane Coffin Jr. and was the first recipient of the William Sloane Coffin Jr. Peacemaker Award on the 50th anniversary of the Peace Action in 2007. She has been on the forefront of countless peace initiatives, including having helped found and having served as president of the Hague Appeal for Peace, which is devoted to the abolition of war. So, give it up for Cora.
Let's talk about Emily.
Let's talk about Cora.
Wow. Hello, everyone. It's a little overwhelming to see so many peace activists in one place. We must come out of here doing something. Anyone have an idea? So, Katya, where are you? I'm supposed to be speaking to you. Katrina, you might have to get another room for all of your awards, but this one is special. There are 3 people who would have loved to have been here applauding you tonight. Your dad, whom you loved to bits, you once told me, and he loved you more. Your husband, Stephen, whose course you took at Princeton, for which he never gave you a grade. And at the time, he was a Nation columnist. And Bill Coffin, who admired and adored you and was so happy when you asked him to perform your marriage to Steve Cohen. Bill Coffin and I once spoke at someone's funeral, I can't recall whose, and I said, too bad he can't hear you. He would have loved to have heard you. How do you know he can't? Intoned Bill Coffin. We don't have to believe that our best admirers can hear us, but we can think about them as we proceed with this William Sloane Coffin Award for Peacemakers. I asked Victor Navasky, okay, from whom you inherited the nation's editor role, what he would say about you. Quote, Katrina applied for a Nation magazine summer internship at the age of 21. She is smart, she is thoughtful and wise, with perfect politics for the Nation magazine and well beyond it. Victor said, with great pleasure, I'm proud to have her as my successor at the Nation. Victor also said, Katrina's Nation was early to oppose the war in Iraq, thank you, Mr. Nichols, and when the rest of the media was endorsing it. He was especially proud that you published Jonathan Schell's The Gift of Time in 1998, which found support for the abolition of nuclear weapons at the unlikeliest of places among the generals and politicians who presided over nuclear strategy during the Cold War. I asked Katrina what in her extraordinary life was she most proud of, and like a perfect mom, she said, I'm proud of having a beautiful daughter, Nika, who is a criminal justice and death penalty lawyer and teaches a seminar at Columbia Law School. Nika, where are you? Woohoo! Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And Mazel Tov, it's a pretty good resume so far. So I bet all of you people here think that peace activists are only those who march or lobby and maybe get arrested against militarism and wars. Have you ever considered a journalist a peace activist? You've read a lot about Katrina appearing on major TV channels, but have you read her columns? Who reads Katrina's columns? Well, you better put your hand up or you'll be embarrassed. So, here we go with her columns. First, Michael Clare, who is the nation's defense correspondent and a professor emeritus of peace and world security studies at Hofstra College, and is now visiting senior fellow at the Arms Control Association, says of Katrina, quote, as editor and publisher, she has sought to expose and arouse citizen action over every form of cruelty, injustice, and brutality in the world, from persecution of minorities to acts of war and genocide. She has informed us again and again of the consequences of excessive military spending. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. And never lets us forget about the ever-present dangers of nuclear weapons and their potential use in combat. As tensions with China and Russia have mounted, she has articulated steps to avoid global conflagration. Thank you, Michael. On the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's address declaring his opposition to the Vietnam War, Katrina, in her Washington Post column, said that King's courage should inform us all to oppose endless wars. Next time you could say to oppose war, endless or otherwise. Just a little suggestion from a side, from a former. She was proud of the nation supporting King, who had been its civil rights correspondent for a decade, and who was attacked by every newspaper in the United States except the Louisville Courier for taking on the war issue instead of staying focused on civil rights. She said in The Nation, King's Riverside church speech will rank as one of the most significant of his career, faced with eloquence and morally uncompromising, unquote. And she listed the United States as escalating endless wars without strategy or sense. You may know that Katrina vanden Heuvel and Stephen Cohen, both fluent in Russian, were close buddies of President Gorbachev, who called them his best friends in the United States. In 2002, The Nation and Jonathan Schell, their peace correspondent and a visionary writer on nuclear issues and abolition, received the Golden Green Award from Gorbachev. Katrina said of Gorbachev, he was the most radical and committed arms reductionist ever to lead a nuclear country, a fervent supporter of nuclear abolition. You quoted Gorby, who said, if we don't attempt what seems impossible, we will risk facing the unthinkable. And he was so right. She cites Reverend William Barber, who today makes the connections, quote, between militarization of our approach to security and militarization of our cities, schools, policing, and our approach to women's bodies. She writes that Barber invokes the moral necessity of resistance to militarism, the war economy, and nuclear and other weapons. Katrina is proud that The Nation is among very few national magazines that has a peace correspondent who opposes mindless wars and other wars and stands strong for movements calling for peace and justice. The Nation, you told me, is a home to think and write about war and peace. On the personal level, you've helped Our Bodies Ourselves in Russian to publish. You are passionate about the truth, and you're a truth teller. You care deeply about stopping the banning of books and protecting free speech. You are on more boards than most of us here put together, but each one influences policy and educates civil society. Your words, your values inspire hundreds of thousands of readers. For these reasons and more, Peace Action of New York State has decided to give you the William Sloane Coffin Award for Peacemakers. Wouldn't Bill be happy to know that you are the recipient of the award in his name? Congratulations. She's not what's wrong with the world. That's what Bill would have said.
Cora. Oh, wow.
You get to hold this now.
Thank you.
Oh, I was wondering.
He's got to take it.
All right. We'll come, Cora.
Where is this going to appear?
If we're lucky, in all of the 24 terrific outlets. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to thank you, Cora. Cora's been my inspiration. What does it say?
It says, Peace Action Fund of New York State honors you for your passionate pursuit of a more just and peaceful world.
Beautiful.
Well deserved.
I wanted to say, Cora has been my inspiration for decades. Cora is someone who embodies peace globally and has inspired women around the world to stand for peace and justice in the way she has for decades. Cora said so much already, and John, to follow them, I'm going to be brief, but I wanted to say that she spoke of Reverend William Coffin, who officiated at our wedding, which I remember. I remember that we talked about Russia and the CIA, and then the honeymoon, Steve went to the United Nations to be with Gorbachev, and I went to the Nation. It cemented the marriage. I want to say that Don Shafer was a great friend of the nation, and he counseled us at different times, and I think what he's done with the student Peace Action is extraordinary. As John, I'm always an editor and a columnist. I want to do a column about all the chapters in this good state, student chapters for peace and justice, because our media often says, well, they're students fighting against climate crisis, or there's no peace and justice movement. It's just been declared, and in that declaration is something that I think the nation does, and our media, not the media in this room, but demobilizes people. Demobilizes people so you don't feel you can be a participant in making change. And what Cora and Bill Coffin and everyone in this room did, and John Nichols, my great colleague, is understand that you can make change, you can have an impact, and you got to work. But there's a hope in that. It's not just rosy optimism that things will work out well, but it's hope that you will, in working for change, make change. I wanted to shout out to my perestroika baby, Nika, who's here with her fiance. Whoa. Nika was conceived in perestroika. There was I think it was no, I was about to say it was Beluga vodka that I think played a role. But I don't want to speak too seriously, but I do think I was talking to Peter Weiss and Cora before. This may be the most dangerous time in U.S. history since the bomb. We may remember, many of us, and if we don't, I always feel that you read to be part of a history you may not have been part of, but the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, is still remembered as perhaps the most dangerous time in terms of possible nuclear conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. But there were back channels. There were people talking. I think today that the threat of the US-Russian conflict is at its gravest. More Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, fathers, sons, being sent to die in a war that could have been avoided, and those on all sides who don't work to end this war will be remembered for it. We live in denial. John spoke about this. The increasing loose talk, the normalization of thinking about the use of nuclear weapons. The Guardian has a piece today, you may have seen it, General Petraeus is just ruminating about the use of nuclear weapons. You turn on MSNBC or CNN, and you got people just talking, well, the baseline, you know, a few low-yield battlefield tactical nuclear weapons. Hiroshima was 15 kilotons, I think. And you're looking at these tactical weapons, which are of much higher kilotonnage. It's horrifying. And in normalizing, you have reckless, it's insane. And then there are pundits who act like combatants. Or there are former military officials who are on our screens who are invested in military companies, but we don't learn that. And if there was sanity, the war might lead us to think more about how to build shared security and peace rather than how to build and shape weapons and ship more weapons. You know, there's a disconnect, which I think is very important for Peace Action's work. There's a disconnect between much of this country and what's going on inside Washington, D.C. They call it the blob, but poll after poll, and I don't trust all polls, but people want security. But they don't want, forgive me, Editor Cora, endless war. They don't want war. They want to be secure. And I think the need to redefine security is something that's so important. And I thought when COVID struck our country, that there would be an understanding that the real threats to our country, nuclear proliferation, pandemics, global inequality, hunger, poverty, and instead we're back in a hyper-militarized world. I've never seen a more militarized time. I may be wrong, but I think it's a disconnect that is pushed by the establishment endlessly. And the military-industrial congressional internet, it's no longer just the military-industrial complex. I think we need to reweave the battered structure of arms control, disarmament, toward abolition. And I think what strikes me very quickly is how we're not advancing, we're regressing. I think of 40 years ago, important in this space, the Swedish Prime Minister, Olof Palme, a man of peace, organized a commission, which was a playbook for peace, which laid out the real challenges. We don't have that today. We need to reconstitute, and it is happening in parts of the world, but it is not getting the attention. The media is not covering these things. There's also 40 years ago, June 12th, 1982. I can't tell you how many nation interns didn't remember. And I think it's incumbent upon us as we move forward with other demonstrations and protests and link with the climate crisis work, that we remember and hold up that moment when 1 million people were in Central Park protesting, demonstrating for an end to the arms race, and it had an impact. The nation was there with a delegation, small group. We had a big poster, but we also had 2 years before the march, an intern wrote a little, this is a power, 500 words, on the nuclear freeze. And it was picked up by Randy Keeler and others in Northampton, and it was put on the ballot, peace on the ballot. I think it's a lesson. Some will say it's insane to talk about peace now when the world is in this new Cold War, hot war. I worry that peace is becoming a subversive idea. I remember my father, who was writing the last chapter of this book he did before he died. And by the way, at 91, and he died at 91, he said, if I were only 80, I would work with Cora Weiss, and we would bring peace to this world. And he went to the UN and sat next to Cora. And it's very important that he found in you his way forward, but he was going to do it. But peace, I remember his editor said, "Peace, really, Bill? It's such a wussy word." No, it's not. It's an important word. And in fact, I think that, picking up on what John said, let me propose a modest intervention. The media should start asking candidates to give us their views on peace. Do they think it's an important U.S. interest? And if so, why? What conflicts do they regard as most dangerous? Which are most ripe for resolution? And what specific policies will they follow to create a more peaceful world? And no, keeping America strong is not a sufficient answer. But I think what also gives me hope, I mentioned ICANN and what's going on in terms of the signatories and state parties. More and more, it's shameful that no nuclear power has signed on. There's also a group Cora's worked with, working across women crossing DMZ, Christina on. There are movements around this country. And we know that the nuclear threat is not siloed. It runs through our cities, our policing, the attack on women's bodies. It's perhaps the most violent instrument, but it is a new generation, I think, is understanding it, watching that. Students honored tonight give hope, their purpose and passion. I want to close, Cora said much of this, but in 2002, The Nation and Jonathan Schell, he was a peace correspondent for The Nation, largely thanks to the generosity of Cora and Peter. And he was extraordinary to work with. And he received, as Cora said, a Global Green Award for the magazine's nuclear coverage. And I received the award from Mikhail Gorbachev. I just want to say that he died at the end of August at 91. He was living outside of Moscow. He despaired of what he was witnessing. He was horrified. He was reading Pushkin, not Putin, and he had turned away from the news. But we had the good fortune, Steve and I, to be at the leading independent newspaper, Novaya Gazeta. Its editor received the Nobel Peace Prize, along with Maria Ressa of the Philippines at the end of last year. And we were sitting at a long table with young investigative journalists, Russian journalists, and Gorbachev was there. And they spoke to him, and they understood what he had left as a legacy in terms of the work they could do. It is being repressed now, but I believe it will come and return. And I hope that as we confront this barbaric war and try to resolve it before more are killed, that we don't stigmatize the many Russians who are opposing this war, because they're good people. And I think of our country during the Iraq War, which The Nation fiercely opposed. But many in Europe looked at America and saw Bush's America, and that's not the case, as we know, as independent dissenters. Cora, I want to just read it again, because a discredited establishment may insist that the abolition of nuclear weapons is unachievable, and therefore a utopian goal, wrong, as Peter Weiss's work would tell us. But Gorbachev used to say, if we don't attempt what seems impossible, we will risk facing the unthinkable. And he and Reagan would say that a nuclear war cannot be waged and can never be won. Now, this has been repeated at summits in these last years, but we need to see more than just words. We must act. Those of us gathered here and online, in the country and on the planet, call for sanity. I mean, if everyone is saying the same thing, no one is saying much of anything, and no one's really thinking. We call for an end to the nuclear arms race, because until the arms race ceases, until we have a real peace movement worldwide, we're not going to go home, by the way. Well, we may go home tonight, but we can't be quiet. We have to write. I use my pen in a way as an organizer, but there are so many great organizers. The idea that you had to celebrate an independent press is so brilliant. I think the idea of celebrating those in the state, close to the ground, close to their communities, close to trust and close to truth that they see. So I hope that The Nation can fulfill this award. I send love to Cora. And I thank Cora for her words. She's been so diligent. She kept calling me, and we had the best time talking as a result. And thanks to John Nichols, who keeps hope alive. And I think hope is, as people, Reverend Barber keeps hope alive. I think I'll close with a quote from our civil rights correspondent from 61 to 67, Martin Luther King Jr. I do go back to the coverage of his speech at Riverside because he was denounced, and we thought it was the most prophetic speech. And in that, I think you see the power of an independent media not tethered to establishment thinking. I will close with this, and thank you for this great award. All right. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military, I wouldn't call it defense, military aggression. By the way, we need to rename the Defense Department the War Department, and we need a Department of Peace, which has been proposed. And a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. Perfect size. Thank you. Thank you. So wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Cora for that wonderful introduction, and to Katrina, the reason we're here gathered to honor tonight. Just truly incredible. Just for context, we've brought up 9/11, 2001 a lot of times. I was 6 years old when 9/11 happened. So all of this coverage, all of this happened when I was 6. Many of our students that we're now working with this semester weren't even born. So this is what we've been born into. And it's the incredible work of people like John and Katrina and Cora that have really paved the way for us to continue to work to build a better future. So thank you again so much. Just another round of applause. Just so grateful, really. As we get ready to close out and head to a reception, those of us in person, I'd love to invite up 2 of our Peace Action Fund of New York State board members and members of the fundraising committee who worked tirelessly to put this event together, Sylvia Rodriguez-Case and Joanne Robinson. And thank you to Stefan from Scandinavia House, who's been doing the tech this whole time. Everything you can see in here has been his work. To Victoria and Scandinavia House for having us. I'll pass it over to Sylvia and Joanne to close out our program.
Whoa, sorry. Well, just a quick congratulations again to Katrina. You're an amazing woman, and thank you for all you work you do for truth, peace, justice, and will continue to do. And congratulations to, I guess I'm talking to them on the TV here, to Peace Action Lemoyne for their student award, and for all the work you've done. Congratulations to all the local journalists that Sally pulled together, and they really do some great work, and they get the word out there for us. The next thing was just, well, a very big thank you to our staff. Emily Rubino, our amazing executive director, who will be off to Belgium in about a week or 2 to be at the International Peace Bureau. She's on the board there, so she's going to represent us, which is fantastic. We have Ashley Crowther, who is our Director of Operations and Communications, and she really pulled this together and made a beautiful journal. So thank you so much, Ashley. I don't know where you are, but wherever you are. And also to Ronnie, who is very new. She's only been here a couple of weeks, but we already feel the effect and the impact of the work she's doing, so thank you. And of course, we thank Sally Jones, who's not on the staff, but an amazing human being who does not stop working. And then, that's it. Jim, thank you for coming. We're glad you're back with us, and you did a lovely talk at the beginning there, tribute for the land. And now I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Robinson. She's a board member, but she's also the chair of the fundraising committee.
I should say they're all chairs. This is the first time in 3 years that we've had an in-person William Sloane Coffin Jr. event. It's been Zoom, 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 and you're all tired of Zoom. But we made it. And we'd like to thank all those people out there, you for contributing and for keeping us going all these years, and for your faith in us and your hope, as John said. And for Emily, Katrina said she was, Cora said she was 21 when she started. Emily is 26 and the youngest admin that Peace Action has ever had. And she has brought us to the national stage with the students and her work. And without your help, your generosity, your belief in Peace Action, we would not be here where we are today. We would not be able to honor people like Katrina vanden Heuvel, people like all the wonderful people that we have done in the past. Barbara Lee, Reverend Darby, our first Cora Weiss. The Peace Lady. Where is she? Right there? Yes, the Peace Lady who helped with Cora, those 12 million people, or those million people in the first 1982. Leslie Kagan. The lady from all of you who've worked so hard to bring us here today. And without the Don Shafer, I call him my godfather because he brought me, John Nichols, to Hastings, to Lucille Gray's house. And we needed a speaker. And whenever we needed a speaker, we just spoke to John. And then he would talk to the people of the nation, and they would come up with these wonderful people. Wonderful, wonderful speakers that continue to enlighten you, continue to bring you the truth, continue to make us a strong, representative organization for peace and humanity. We have 14 student chapters, as you heard this evening, and 11 community chapters. And we also have our people who work, allies who work with us, who on the different issues, as you heard today, women's issues, civil rights, peace, everything. But without you there, without you out there, we would never exist. You have brought us wonderful programs through your participation and your generosity. And now we've gone to the digital age, and if you want to buy a t-shirt, if you want to buy a book, all you have to do is click with your iPhone and you'll get through. Thank you again this evening for making us an incredible organization. And I'd like to thank Sally Weissman. I'd like to thank Carol Abrams on the committee. I would like to thank Ashley Crothers on the committee and all the people that have been involved with making this a wonderful program this evening. So don't forget, take your pledge cards, take your iPhones, sign up. If you're not a member and you're a guest this evening, become a member of Peace Action. We're where it's at. We are the people who believe in peace and diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to take a couple photos up here. But yes, that's what I was about to say, Sally. Always in logistics mode. But yes, so we invite you all to join us at a reception upstairs. It's on the second floor. You can either take 2 different flights of stairs or an elevator if you're patient. And we'll meet you up there for food and drinks and to celebrate and get to mingle a little bit more. But thank you so much again, everyone, and we'll see you up there and hopefully get to chat a little more.